In a remote valley of Ethiopia, there is a tribe that other Ethiopians avoid. Even armed police do not enter their territory without backup. These people have a reputation for violence, armed confrontations, and aggressive defense of their land. Their reputation arrived in the outside world long before any researcher did, and it was simple. Do not go there without a reason. Do not go alone. They have fought every neighbor who tried to push them off their land, first with spears, then with rifles, and now with advanced weapons. But what disturbs outsiders even more than the weapons is what they do to their women. Something that looks, at first glance, like the most extreme act of suffering one person can ask another to endure. And when researchers finally ask why choose this painful, permanent modification, the answers reveal something unexpected about beauty, power, and identity. What Western visitors see as medieval torture, these women see as something else entirely. This is the story of the Mursi, one of the most feared tribe in Ethiopia. This is Duka. He is 43 years old, and he remembers the exact day his father brought the first rifle into their home. He was 8. His father set it against the wall of their hut, and the family stood around it the way you stand around something that has changed the shape of the room simply by being in it. His father had traded 2 cattle for it from a neighboring man at the border market, 2 cattle that had taken years to accumulate, because something had shifted in the valley, and everyone who was paying attention could feel it. His father never used it to raid. He used it to make raiding them a calculation that came out wrong for anyone who ran the numbers. Duka grew up learning the rifle the way he learned cattle, through proximity and instruction, and the understanding that both were tools for keeping what was theirs. He has carried one for 20 years. He has fired it twice in his life, once at a snake, the other in the air, during a confrontation with neighboring tribe. He is not a violent man. He is a man who lives in a place where the difference between violence and peace is often decided by what you are holding when the question comes up. His son is 12 and already asking when he will learn. Duka has not answered yet. He is trying to decide what the honest answer is. The Omo Valley sits in the southwestern corner of Ethiopia, where 3 rivers cut through dry savanna in a landscape that feels like the rest of the world forgot to finish building it. One of the most ethnically complicated regions on Earth, home to dozens of distinct peoples who have shared and fought over this territory for thousands of years. The Mursi occupy a stretch of it that most outsiders never reach. Their neighbors are not gentle. Rival groups live in every direction, and between all of them there have been cattle raids, territorial conflicts, and blood feuds across generations. Being feared here is not a reputation you build for show. It is something you earn, because the alternative is to lose everything. Researchers who spent time with the Mursi found a society organized entirely around survival. People who farmed along the river during wet season and herded cattle across drier uplands when the water pulled back. The cattle were not simply food or wealth. They were the currency of marriage, alliance, and reputation. Protecting them was a matter of life and what comes after. So when you see Duka walking with a rifle, it begins to look less like aggression and more like arithmetic. But knowing that still does not prepare you for what the Mursi have built on the inside. The rituals, the ceremonies, the philosophy, pressed into a clay plate worn in a woman's lower lip. That story runs far deeper than any photograph has managed to reach. The lip plate is the thing that challenges every visitor's assumptions about beauty and identity. Photographs of Mursi women have circulated for decades across travel magazines and social media feeds, and in almost every case the image is treated as spectacle, something to marvel at, something to recoil from. But the plate is not decoration in the way a bracelet is decoration. It is a rite of passage, a declaration, and for many women, the single moment that defines who they become. What nobody looking at those photographs is usually told is that the women choose it. The process begins around age 15 or 16. A girl's lower lip is cut by her mother or an older woman she trusts. A small wooden peg is placed inside to hold the opening. Over the following months, the peg is replaced with larger ones, the stretching slow and manageable once the cut heals. After roughly a year, the opening receives a clay disc the girl or her mother has shaped, fired, and painted by hand. Each plate is individual. No two are the same. The size matters economically. Larger plates, those spanning 12 centimeters or more, have historically brought more cattle from the groom's family. A woman entering marriage with a substantial plate arrived with visible proof of her endurance, her family's standing, and her willingness to claim a place in the community's understanding of beauty and worth. Researchers who spent years studying Mursi women found that the outside framing of the plate as mutilation landed differently among the women themselves. Many described wearing it as an assertion that made them visibly, unmistakably Mursi in a region where ethnic identity is tied to land, cattle, and survival. Removing it, some said, would feel like removing a piece of themselves. The Mursi word for beauty does not translate cleanly. It carries the meanings of strength, effort, and visibility. A woman who is beautiful in Mursi terms is someone whose appearance testifies to what she has been willing to become. There is something about this tribe that the travel photographs never show. The Mursi know exactly what it is and how outsiders look at them. They have known it for decades. And some of them decided to use that gaze rather than simply endure it. Tourism arrived in the Omo Valley in the 1980s and grew through the 1990s into something organized. Tour operators began selling packages, and visitors arrived with cameras specifically to photograph the lip plates and ceremonial dress. Mursi women began charging for photographs. They added extra ornaments, held poses, arranged themselves for the frame being sought, and provided it on their own terms at a price they set. What looked from the outside like a window into untouched ancient life was, on the ground, a transaction the Mursi controlled. The plate became simultaneously a rite of passage, a marker of identity, and a source of income. Whether those three things can share the same object indefinitely is a question the community is still inside. What you see in a photograph of a Mursi woman is a single frozen moment. What you cannot see is the conversation she is part of, one that has been running for generations and is nowhere near finished. To understand the full weight of that conversation, you have to go further back, before the cameras, before the tourists, and anyone from outside had a reason to arrive at all. Before the lip plate became an image reproduced across thousands of travel blogs, it existed inside a world with its own complete logic, its own way of sorting the brave from the ordinary. The Mursi did not need anyone else to tell them who they were. They had built their own system for that, and the most important of them was called donga. Donga is a stick-fighting ritual, and describing it as a sport understates what it means. Young Mursi men, typically between their late teens and late 20s, compete in formalized duels using poles roughly 2 meters long, fighting bare-chested with only a small shield between them and the blow. A man who puts his opponent cleanly on the ground wins. The crowd watches, including the young women of marriageable age, because winning donga is one of the clearest paths to social standing available to a Mursi man. Duka competed in his 20s. He did not win often, but he competed. He says the best fighters were not the strongest ones. They were the ones with no fear of falling, because a man afraid to fall cannot commit to anything. He watches his son move through the settlement and wonders sometimes whether his son has that quality. There is something the Mursi do that no other culture in the valley has ever built in quite the same way. It does not involve a rifle, a cattle herd, or a lip plate. It involves a word, spoken aloud in front of the entire community, one that once said cannot be unsaid. What that word means, and who has the right to say it, reveals something about the Mursi that no photograph has come close to capturing. The Mursi practice a form of collective judgment called guru, in which any man can stand before the assembled community and speak freely about a grievance, a decision, or a wrong he believes has been done. There is no chief whose permission he needs, no council that filters what can be raised. A man who believes something is unjust stands up and says so, in front of everyone, and the community listens because the system demands it. What makes this remarkable is not just the freedom to speak, but what follows. There is no ruling from above. Only conversation, sometimes lasting hours, sometimes days, until something approaching consensus forms. Duka has stood in guru 3 times in his life, once over a cattle dispute with a cousin, another when a man from outside tried to graze on land his family had worked for years, and the hardest time when he believed his own father had acted wrongly and said so out loud with his father standing 10 feet away. Duka has never forgotten it, not because he was right, because the system allowed him to say a hard thing in front of everyone and survive it. His son is 12. He watches the community gatherings the way Duka once watched his father's rifle, understanding that what he is looking at is a tool, and that the time to learn it is before you need it. Duka's son will stand in Guru one day. He will say something that costs him something, and the valley will decide what it means. The Mursi are not just people who survived, they are people who built, out of nothing but necessity and stubbornness, a way of surviving together. There are dozens of tribes like this, each one sitting on a story that the outside world has looked at and completely misread. If you want to know what those stories actually are, you know where to find them.